Everyone has been assuming that Bryce Young is going to go first or second overall. But is there a chance he falls to the Indianapolis Colts? And boy, would that be something. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle podcast presented by Fan Nation on SI.com. My name is Andrew Moore, and I'm joined here by my fellow writer and colleague at Horseshoe Huddle, Drake Wally. Drake, looking at the calendar, we are 3 weeks from today, 3 weeks from today, from the first round of the NFL draft, and we can put all this talk to rest. How you doing, brother? Are you going to make it these 3 weeks? Because I'm starting to myself. I'm thinking I don't know if I can handle this much longer.
Yeah, it's really starting to get to the point where, you're seeing so many different articles and so many different takes and so many different rumors and, mock drafts. They never stop coming, but I just keep on reading them. So, but I do got to say, I'm right there with you. I think that right up until draft day, especially on draft day, I'm just going to be a nervous wreck. Like I'm going to need a beer or maybe seven.
We're in peak smoke screen season right
Oh
now,
yeah.
where every little report gets blown out of proportion. Agents are playing games with the media, teams are playing games with the media, all in an effort to throw everybody off the scent of what they're actually going to do, try to hype up different prospects. It's gonna be a lot of fun over these next 3 weeks. But before we dive in, hey guys, haven't done so already, please, we really appreciate all the love and support and all the following you guys have been doing. Let's keep that up. If you haven't done so already, please go ahead and follow Horseshoe Huddle on Twitter at Colts on FN. Like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook and subscribe to that YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know whenever Drake and I are going live. Destin and Shad. There might even be, we're kind of talking about possibly doing a live show on the draft. We'll combining the guys. We'll have to see if that comes to fruition, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And we've got already a ton of people in the chat. We've got Logan Schmidt here, the GOAT. We've got Wyatt Law. We've got Sky. We've got Truitt, who's saying great job for guesting Drake on Bring the Juice. The Common Colts podcast is here. We've got Quentin. He said, I'm over off season already. I think we all are. But Drake, the man that we're going to talk about, we talked about CJ Stroud on Monday. We thought he was a really good quarterback prospect, probably not going to end up coming to the Colts. Now it's time for Bryce Young, the other quarterback that we think is probably going to go in the top. Here's Saul Guzman here. And guys, as we're talking this evening, if you want to throw a super chat in there, again, we would greatly appreciate it. We'll give you a shout out. We'll make sure to answer your question right away. We'll give you priority there. But as I was saying, CJ Stroud, we talked about Monday. Tonight, it is Bryce Young. And for Bryce Young, a lot of people think that it's a lock that he goes to either Carolina at 1 or the Texans at number 2, just because of the type of prospect he is. And we're gonna dive into that right now. So Bryce Young, obviously quarterback, has been the starting quarterback at Alabama for the past 2 seasons. He was even in high school was the California Gatorade Player of the Year, and then his 2021 season just incredible. Heisman Trophy winner, Maxwell Award winner, Davey O'Brien Award winner, consensus All-American, first team All-SEC. Bryce Young was the best player in the country in 2021. Now, he had a little bit of an injury in 2022, caused him to miss a couple games, still made second team All-SEC. And here are his stats, even on a quote-unquote down year. 3,328 yards, and I think about 12 games, 32 touchdowns, just 5 interceptions, and then he also had 4 rushing touchdowns to go along with 184 yards rushing. Bryce Young is the real deal. So before we dive into the specifics, Drake, what's just your overall feel of Bryce Young as a prospect?
I mean, for me, it's also forgive my dog. I think somebody just dropped off a package. But I think that polished, I think balanced, I think probably best overall. I think precision, leadership, natural fit for the NFL. He's got a mind like no other. I think he's going to be a great quarterback. He's definitely going to be able to hit the ground running, probably quicker than anybody else, honestly.
And of course, Logan Schmidt, this is why you're the GOAT, man. We really appreciate the super chat. If you guys don't follow Logan on Twitter, go do it. That man is hilarious. Great Colts content all the
Very
time.
funny.
And
Yeah.
he's the man that's still leading the Lamar Jackson train. Hey, I mean, you never know. What there could be crazy things that happen in this draft cycle. Maybe the Colts actually don't take a quarterback and instead they do target Lamar. But it does seem like the Colts are wanting to go that rookie quarterback route to really set themselves up for a rookie contract. I would say a quarterback on a rookie deal opens so much other things with the cap space. They really want to try to keep their draft picks, but hey, crazier things have happened. We're talking about the team that literally hired Jeff Saturday off of the ESPN set to coach this team in the second half of the season. So I'm not going to rule anything out there. So as Logan says, I agree, sadly. But Drake, you kind of started things out here talking about the pros of Bryce Young, and believe me, there are a lot of them. And I think you touched on it. I kind of want to expand on this is his leadership and his preparation. There are zero questions about the type of person and the type of mental aptitude of Bryce Young as a quarterback. I mean, there's stories about Bryce Young. The Alabama would play on Saturday. Coaches would give the guys the opposing game plans on Sundays, and Bryce Young would already have it memorized and come back Monday morning, literally less than 48 hours after they had finished their game, ready for the next opponent, ready, have that game plan mastered, and ready to make adjustments. The kid's football IQ is just off the charts.
Well, and that's definitely going to be one of the things that's going to help him hit the ground running, I think, quicker than the other prospects is he's got the ridiculous IQ. Like you said, he's a natural leader, but he also just does things very well consistently. He's low turnover. It seems like even at Alabama, he would elevate the offense while just minimalizing turnovers. So his decision making is bar none fantastic. I don't think that you're ever going to deal with him having turnover issues. There's just something about him that doesn't really yell at me, hey, this guy's going to take a bunch of risks that are completely unneeded. So I just think that he's going to be very, very solid. He's going to be a great quarterback. And obviously, I think one thing that he actually has is some pretty decent arm strength. You don't think about that when you talk about Bryce Young, but watching him at the pro day, he looked very relaxed with every single throw and hit a lot of them right on the money.
Yeah, with Bryce Young, I mean, even though a lot of times you see him being able to create when the play breaks down, he hardly ever puts the ball in harm's way. He takes care of the football, like you said, makes really good decisions with the football, and I think a lot of that comes with his preparation and his high football IQ. The game never is too fast for Bryce Young. He's able to slow it down in the most crucial situations. When a play breaks down, when that pocket gets muddy, one of the biggest criticisms that we talked about on Monday of C.J. Stroud is that a lot of times in college, when that pocket broke down, his play really suffered. Now, again, you saw it against Georgia. That wasn't really the case, but other times throughout his career, that did happen. With Bryce Young, that's not a concern whatsoever. When the play breaks down, a lot of times that's when Bryce Young is at his best, being able to create, being able to keep the play alive, and still fire a perfect pass down the field. And you talked about how he elevated the team around him. Yes, I know, guys, we're talking about Alabama here, the team that constantly has the 5-star recruits. But when you look back, especially last season in particular, when you look back at the wide receivers and the weapons that Bryce Young had around him, it's not necessarily the same supporting cast on offense, at least, that Alabama is used to having, especially in recent years. So you don't have it's not a situation where you have CJ Stroud throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr., Jackson Smith and Jigba, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, all of those guys. Bryce Young last year didn't have a very good receiving core and had to cover up a lot of those holes. And I think that's one thing that definitely stood out about his game.
Well, and that's something that's really interesting that you mentioned that. It's like I know that everyone looks at his numbers and they might see like the 3,300 passing yards and whatnot. But like you mentioned, no one talks about his lack of weapons, and it's not downing any of these guys. I mean, they're college football players, but Bryce Young did not have Derrick Henry. Okay. Bryce Young did not have Kenyon Drake in the backfield with Derrick Henry. Like he didn't have a absolutely disgusting run attack and a couple streamers right down the field that could take the top off of a defense. Bryce Young basically did that on his own. He would take the top off of the defense with great ball placement. And again, you're talking about a guy who won the Heisman Trophy with probably not the best supporting cast. He might have been able to do it 2 years in a row if he stays healthy and has maybe some more talent. I mean, for all you know, they might win the title. You never know. I mean, he was fantastic. So I think that it was awesome that you mentioned his ability to kind of get out of the pocket. He reminds me a lot of, we've talked about this till we're blue in the face, but Kyler Murray, that's how he avoids a lot of contact is he's just very elusive. He's shorter than most of the guys coming after him, but he just avoids contact. So I think if Bryce Young can do that, he can avoid injury too.
Yeah, and that's going to be the biggest thing. Obviously, we're going to talk about the cons, and the
Oh yeah.
biggest one is his size. But I mean, when you watch a lot of these plays at Alabama, I mean, Bryce Young, yes, with his small stature, he's not going against not every. I shouldn't say never, but not every weekend he's going against NFL quality defensive linemen. But at the same time, he only missed one game in college, so he really hasn't had injury questions or injury issues throughout college. But the NFL is a completely different ball game. And then I mean, we're just talking about looking at Bryce Young as a quarterback too. I mean, regardless of all the splashy plays and everything, you still have to win from the pocket. And Bryce Young is up there with CJ Stroud as the most accurate quarterback in this class. I mean, there you saw so many times where he would throw a 30-yard pass and it would be like it was just an extended handoff at times. Bryce Young, when you give him enough time in that pocket, is going to just absolutely carve you up and be surgical. So his accuracy, this is kind of, I'll get to my comps for Bryce Young in a bit, but almost like Joe Burrow in a sense with his accuracy. It really seems to me that no matter what happens or anywhere on the field that the ball needs to be put, Bryce Young can do it.
Well, and what did we hear Shane Steichen say? He wants somebody obsessed with their craft. This is a guy who will memorize everything and then come back to you mere days later with suggestions. So there's the first box. Accuracy, he's got that. There's the second box. And you actually used the phrase ability to create. I mean, he
Mm-hmm.
has all three of those qualities. So if he literally somehow is right there, if the Colts trade up to 3 and he's just sitting there, I mean, you'd be like, it's hard. You'd be
Mm-hmm.
like,
Oh
man, with
yeah.
all the qualities. And like we've said it a million times. If he was 6 feet tall, he'd be the consensus number 1 pick.
Yeah, and I think that's the really the only hang up when you're talking about Bryce Young. If Bryce Young, if we're and it's really not even the height. I can handle the height.
Mhm.
It's more about the weight. And I guess that can segue us into talking about some of the cons of Bryce Young here. It's really the weight that's the issue. If Bryce Young was, I mean, I know he measured in at the combine at 204 pounds. Guys, he is not going to play at 204 pounds. I have it on good authority from people that I trust that Bryce Young at Alabama last year, while he was listed at 190 some pounds, his playing weight was more around 170 pounds. That's tiny in the if you're talking about in the NFL for a quarterback. I mean, there's a difference between, yes, Kyler Murray is a small quarterback. Russell Wilson is a small quarterback, but their builds are so much different than Bryce Young's. Like Kyler Murray is thick. Russell Wilson is thick. Bryce Young doesn't have that thick build to him that can absorb the hits. And we've already seen with Kyler Murray how his body is starting to break down. Russell Wilson has done a really good job throughout his career of staying healthy, but a lot of times with those smaller quarterbacks, the risk of injury is a lot greater. So, but yeah, I mean, if Bryce Young was actually playing around 205, 210 pounds and was 6 foot, yes, there would be no question Bryce Young would go number 1 overall in this draft.
Well, and to kind of build off of that, there was one point I forgot is that his size, he seemed to overcome that for the most part in college. Now, this is different. This is the NFL. Now, I cannot imagine a 170-pound Bryce Young getting sacked as much as Russell Wilson has. I mean, imagine if Russell Wilson was 170 pounds, or if his playing weight was even 185. He's like probably a solid 210 or maybe like 205. I mean, this is a guy who literally at times was the most sacked quarterback in the NFL. In fact, just this recent year, number 2 for most sacks allowed were the Colts, and number 1 were the Denver Broncos. So it happened again. It happened again. He was the most sacked quarterback. So it's like, I can't imagine Bryce Young getting sacked 64, 65, I think, times in a year without missing at least 2 or 3 different games. So it's going to be interesting to see how he deals with that. I know that there's not many weaknesses. There's not many things that we can put as a con, but this is such a big, glaring one that you really have to almost factor your game plan around it and make sure that the pocket can move too.
Yeah, that's a big thing. You're not going to want to just have him sit back there, do seven step drops the entire game, because the pass rush is going to get to him. And yes, Bryce Young can create. Like I've said, he is a master at being able to do that. But when you have those guys barreling down on you, you also have to protect your quarterback. He's not going to be Andrew Luck, where he's 6'4", 240 pounds, and could absorb all the beatings that he did before even his body finally broke down. And here's a good comparison by DSG Goodbar. Love the support. Thank you all so much for always tuning in. If you guys haven't done so already, make sure you give them a follow. But not a 1-to-1 comparison, but Nick Saban compared him to Drew Brees, and I did see that. Drake, what do you think about the comparison between Bryce Young and Drew Brees?
That's actually I think that the way that they operate out of the pocket, that's very interesting, because I would say that is probably what makes them so similar in that regard. But real quick, that's interesting. Drew Brees was 210 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that dude was just a lunch pail, I'm going to go chop down a tree in the woods type of guy. So like he was ready for the contact, and he was healthy pretty much all the time. So that is still 40 pounds heavier. Okay. That at 170 pounds, that is just, to me, for a quarterback. For a slot receiver, that's tiny. But you're talking about a guy that's getting hit by defensive backs, sometimes getting tackled from behind, not getting hit by 275, 300-pound Myles Garrett's,
Right. I do like the comparison when you're talking about their games as passers, because I think that while Bryce Young has a good enough arm, it's not anything that you're going to be ecstatic about, or it's nothing to write home about, I should say. When you're talking about the top 4 quarterbacks in this class, I would say Bryce Young probably has the and I don't even like saying the weakest arm, but if you're putting in order of strongest arm, he's probably at number 4. But Bryce Young could still make every single throw on the football field. Same with Drew Brees. Drew Brees did not have the strongest arm. When you're talking about strong arm quarterbacks in NFL history, Drew Brees' name does not come up. But Drew Brees was pinpoint accurate. He knew how to pick apart a defense. Even though he was only 6 foot tall, he was able to kind of move the pocket in little ways within the within that pocket to kind of find the holes between the offensive linemen, between the defenders, those little pockets where he could throw the ball. So I love it from a passing standpoint. And as DSG Goodbar says right here, I'm sure he meant it more mental than physical. That's exactly what I was about to get to, that mental aspect of the game as well for Bryce Young, because Drew Brees, again, was very cerebral, not on the same level as Peyton Manning, but nobody's on that level. But he would be able to dice up a defense. Bryce Young is right there in terms of what he can do cerebrally at the quarterback position, not being fooled by any defense out there, being able to to go do all the protection calls, be able to call plays at the line of scrimmage, get out of different plays if they need to, things of that nature. And of course, I got to put this up here. Did Stats Matt have a hot date this evening? Yeah, I don't know what Stats Matt is in here in the chat. He's probably watching the Masters or something. Freddie, shout out. You good. You're a Michigan football fan. Hey, I was wearing green for the Masters today. That's why I put this on. But hey, Irish football, we'll always get a kudos for that too. But yeah, it's all going to come down to whether a team is okay with Bryce Young's size. If a team isn't okay with Bryce Young's size, then they might knock him down a little bit. But man, it is so hard to ignore all of the other things that he does well, because honestly, when you're looking at it, he does pretty much everything well outside of the things that he can't control, and that's his size.
Well, and one thing that I was thinking about is it's like all of these factors, we're putting everything together. Okay, his height, which isn't the biggest concern. I think he's like 5'10, 5'11 or something like that.
Right.
So that they could be worse. But like you factor in the height mixed with the fact that he is so light, so small, he's already struggled with the injuries. Now he's going to go number one potentially. So imagine he goes to, in fact, I would even say Houston's probably less equipped for a quarterback right now than Carolina would be. Let's say that there's not efficient blocking. Let's say that there's not targets outside of Dalton Schultz right now that can really get open one-on-one. Let's say that Young has to do more than he hopefully would need to. You mix in the fact that he's so small and he starts taking some big hits early on. I mean, it could end up, and I hope this doesn't happen, but it could end up being like something like a Joe Burrow situation where you're like looking at yourselves like an organization going, my God, man, we just got this guy a torn ACL in week 5, and the line was just letting so much through. So we'll just have to see, but he might come to a very ill-equipped team offensively.
And he's got to be able to handle that. He's got to be able to not, it's not no longer going to be at Alabama. I know we talked about how his supporting cast wasn't the greatest, but Alabama was still a top 5, top 10 football team his entire tenure there at Alabama. It's going to be a whole lot different when he comes to the Carolina Panthers, Houston Texans, Indianapolis Colts, whichever team he does end up with. But then that kind of moves us along. I saw Wyatt's question there, say with your choice of any quarterback in this draft, do you take Young? And that kind of gets us into our final segment, Drake. Will Bryce Young be an Indianapolis Colt? And I know a lot of people out there are probably thinking like this is an easy question as the man shows up, let's see, almost a half an hour late. God, Stats, Matt, what you doing?
But he's
buddy?
here.
Yeah, at least you made it. So we'll let you slide there. But honestly, it seems like it's an easy question. That no, he's either going to go number 1 overall, number 2 overall. There is a scenario that I'll get to here in a bit that Bryce Young ends up falling to the Indianapolis Colts. But Drake, as of today, your gut feeling, where does Bryce Young end up, and is it with the Indianapolis Colts?
I don't think that I'm almost 100% certain he's not going to be a Colt. And I know that you've got your take. My take is that Ballard has look, I understand he went and got Isaiah McKenzie. Okay, this is also a wide receiver, all right, who has multiple capabilities outside of just receiving. So that's maybe an exception, or a guy like Hilton. Okay, well, this is a quarterback, and he wants the bigger, athletically traitsy type guys like Levis or like Richardson. Those really stick out to Ballard. So that's one thing. And I also think that Chris Ballard would be massively concerned every single play watching Bryce Young out there takes a big hit, being concerned every single play. I know he can't help it, but that is something that's very glaring. And there was actually one more thing I was going to say is that I just think that he's going to go to the Houston Texans. And it's because I've been continuously hearing how high on Bryce Young the Texans are. And I feel like DeMeco Ryans really likes him. Even though he's defensive, he's not going to go Will Anderson. I think he's also pounding the table for Bryce Young. So I think he won't go to the Colts, but he will go number 2.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick right now, I do think that Bryce Young ends up going to the Houston Texans, and I know I've seen all the reports lately. I've seen how the sports books have moved about how Chris Mortensen of ESPN came out and said that Bryce Young will be the number one pick, and he very well may be. I'm not ruling that out. But from what I know that the Panthers really love CJ Stroud. The Panthers also know that the Houston Texans love Bryce Young as a prospect. Like I said, it's smokescreen season. All of these teams are using the media in different ways, including the Indianapolis Colts. All these teams are using the media in various ways to try to get that narrative out there. So the Panthers probably are trying to bring up this big rumor that, oh, they really like Bryce Young, they really want Bryce Young. Well, it's because the Panthers probably know that they're wanting to take CJ Stroud. They want the Houston Texans to think that they're going to take Bryce Young to try to make Houston jump that one spot, take Bryce Young. They'll still get CJ Stroud there at 2, and they'll recoup some of the draft capital they had to give up in order to get up to that number 1. That's what I think is going on right now with all of those reports. But I do think that Bryce Young, and in the end of the day, will be a Houston Texan. However, there is a situation that Bryce Young could be available for the Colts at number 4. Or go. I won't even say that. I'll say, because he wouldn't get to number 4, but he would be available at 3. Because the Panthers, I like I said, we fully assume they're going to take CJ Stroud. I would honestly put money on that. But Houston has been playing this game, so let's just play devil's advocate here. Let's say Houston, as they said, they don't have to take a quarterback. Let's say they don't take a quarterback and they take the best defender. They take Will Anderson Jr. To be that defensive cornerstone. Then all of a sudden, the Cardinals are sitting there at 3, and Bryce Young is available. I think there would be an absolute mad dash of multiple teams wanting to trade up as quickly as they could and give what they could to go up there and get Bryce Young at 3. The Colts might be one of those. I've heard that the Colts are very high on Bryce Young. I don't know if he's their quarterback 1. I don't know that for certain. But I do know that they are very impressed with everything he could do mechanically, everything that he can do between the ears, that football IQ. And there's a reason, guys, that the Colts in all these press conferences, when they're talking about the quarterback, you've heard it from Ballard, you've heard it from Steichen, you've even heard it from Jim Irsay. Quarterbacks come in all shapes and sizes. We already know Jim Irsay loves that Alabama quarterback. Thinks he's pretty good. There might be a little bit of smokescreen to that, but at the same time, there's not, because Bryce Young is a hell of a player. So then I'm going to pose this question to you, Drake. Say this situation does happen. Bryce Young is sitting there at 3. Do you think the Colts would then trade up for Carolina with the Arizona Cardinals and go and get Bryce Young if he's available there at the Texans pass on him? Bryce Young is available there at number 3.
Now, just to be sure I understand this correctly, the Panthers already took Stroud?
Panthers took Stroud at 1. Houston took Will Anderson at 2.
Okay.
The Colts are sitting there at 4. Arizona's on the clock. Do you think Chris Ballard and the Colts trade up to Arizona at that point in time, get number 3, and then take Bryce Young? Or do they take Anthony Richardson or Will Levis?
Yes. Oh, my goodness. Oh, man. I never thought of a scenario where the Texans actually don't take a quarterback.
Right? But it's possible.
You know what? I think because like right now, I think the Colts are thinking Levis, Richardson. This is just my own mind. If I'm the GM, I'm thinking, okay, so these are the 2 guys we've got pretty much access to, I think, are Levis and Richardson. Both high traits, both a little raw. One's way more raw than the other, but high traits to super high, whatever. Oh my gosh, Bryce Young's available. He can hit the ground running right away. Okay, he would right away. Your offense is going to get a pretty significant uptick, I think, compared to last year. So imagine him with Steichen now, a guy that is as intelligent as Steichen is football-wise, with Bryce Young, who's going to bring him suggestions. Are you kidding me? Jim Bob Cooter. I can't remember the quarterback. Cam Turner. Cam Turner. He already worked with a smaller quarterback like Kyler Murray. Maybe that's perfect. So I think if he was available at 3, they'd take him.
Yeah, I don't think there would be a scenario that if Bryce Young gets past Houston, that Indianapolis would not do whatever they could
They'd
to
take the
go up
chance.
there and get Young. And I know we're talking about Anthony Richardson, and believe me, I'm a big Anthony Richardson fan too. I honestly think there's a path for success, and I'm a big fan of all four of these quarterbacks. I really do. I really am. I think you would have to, it's not the same path to success. I think there would have to be multiple different changes in different areas for each quarterback to succeed. But when you're talking about Bryce Young, and who my comp for is a small Joe Burrow. I honestly, the way he plays is like Joe Burrow. He's a guy that really doesn't like to win with his legs, but he certainly can. He creates when the play breaks down. He's cool, calm, collected, cerebral at the quarterback position, can put it wherever it needs to go. Good arm, great accuracy, fantastic creator, and he just wins. Bryce Young just wins. So high end comp, I think it's a small Joe Burrow. That low end comp, I know I used it for CJ Stroud last week, but I'm gonna use it again. Tua Tagovailoa as a low end comp, a guy that can move a little bit, but he could have a lot. He's a smaller quarterback, could have some injury issues, things of that nature. I don't think, and I think he'll probably end up somewhere in the middle, probably closer to the high end comp than the low end comp, just because I think Bryce Young's ceiling is fairly high personally. But yeah, I mean, if you're talking about Bryce Young being there at 3, which again, not likely, probably, but if Bryce Young is available there at 3, I think the Colts would have a hard time being able to sit there and say, we're good. Because to me, and I think I've given this on the show a couple times, CJ Stroud is 1A, Bryce Young is 1B, Richardson is 3, Levis at 4. And I don't think the gap is that huge between their potential as far as CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, all those guys, because of how high AR's potential actually is. But man, it's just hard to pass on a prospect like Bryce Young if he's sitting there right in front of you.
Well, and again, I think that at the end of the day, if you want to lean on one thing that makes Young just so appealing to a guy like Steichen, it's the brain. Bryce Young is so intuitive and he's very instinctive. He doesn't turn the ball over. Oh, again, he's accurate. He is a leader. He's obsessed with his craft and he can create. All right. And the guy can also take you by surprise because you might underestimate him because of his size. I mean, 5'10", 175, 180 pounds, whatever he ends up playing at, that's going to get a lot of guys wanting to hit him hard. And I think that if there's one guy that the Colts line could potentially be like really, really collect around, it's Bryce Young. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think CJ Stroud would really get them that way too. But I think if you're talking about raw, pure leadership that's ready day one, it's Bryce Young.
Right. Either way, I mean, I think Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, I think they're great quarterbacks. I think that each one of them has top 10 potential. I think the biggest part of it is both of these guys are great kids, great people. So it's going to be tough for them. It's going to be hard for them not to succeed because of the drive they have, the work ethic, just the type of people they are. So, but that's Bryce Young, everybody. Hope you guys all enjoyed the breakdown of Bryce Young. As we do all of these top 5 quarterbacks. Next week, I think the chat's going to be pretty spicy because we have the 2 most polarizing figures in this quarterback draft class, and Anthony Richardson and Will Levis next week. But it's going to be fun. So before we wrap up the show, let's move it along to the latest Colts news and rumors. And I did see someone in the chat asking about Will Levis's workout today with the Colts. So we're going to kind of talk about that as well here. So and I see the chat saying, thanks guys, we're not done, don't worry about it, we're going to talk some more Colts football, so make sure you stay on with us. So this is the latest news and rumors. I want to kind of talk about who the Colts are sending to all these workouts, because the Colts aren't bringing in to go watch these guys work out. They're not bringing them into the Indianapolis facility. They're going out to them per NFL rules. As Logan Schmidt says, careful bringing up Will Levis. But it's going to be so they went out to Southern California and worked out CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, because both of those guys are training together in Southern California. That's where they're both from. They're both really good friends, so they're training together. Colts were able to work out both of those guys at the same spot, so that was actually pretty easy for them. Now they're going down to Lexington. They worked out Will Levis today. I'm not sure if Anthony Richardson is tomorrow or if it's early next week. I'm not 100% sure on that. But here's who the Colts are sending to these workouts. So Chris Ballard, Shane Steichen, offensive coordinator Jim Bob Cooter, quarterback coach Cam Turner, assistant GM Ed Dodds, and the director of college scouting Matt Turpening. So it is interesting to see just the differences between how the Colts are operating and how the Panthers are operating. So Panthers are sending 14 different people to these pro days, every single one of them. The Colts sent Morocco Brown to some, sent Mike Lacey, their area scout, to some. But the big contingent for the Colts is going all together for these private workouts, these private get-togethers, so that way they can all have their contingent face-to-face with this prospect, one-on-one, and they're not fighting with other teams, don't have to worry about any of that. It is good to it is interesting to see just the differences between how the Panthers are handling things and how the Colts are handling things.
Yeah, it's been way more of an aggressive approach, I think, to go work out these quarterbacks, because you got to think, again, we've talked about this a lot as well. We kind of have to go back to a lot of points talking about quarterbacks over the time waiting for the draft. And one thing that we've said a lot of is that there is no quote unquote generational talent. Okay. So like obviously in 97, the Colts were pretty damn sure they were taking Peyton Manning. 2012, they knew dang good and well that they were going to take Andrew Luck. They basically have 4 to 5 quarterbacks, if they are considering Hendon Hooker, that they have to pick from. So yeah, they have to do their absolute due diligence. And I actually think that it's pretty interesting. I would love to hear Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard and Jim Bob Cooter just all talking about these guys. It would be just so great to be a fly on the wall there.
Oh, it definitely would be. DSG Goodbar asks, any world in which Indy trades for Trey Lance instead of drafting? I haven't heard anything on that. I haven't heard the 49ers really make Trey Lance available at this point either. But I don't know how high the Colts really were on Trey Lance. I think at this point, it would kind of be, since Trey Lance really hasn't played much, you'd basically be kind of getting a rookie quarterback anyway. So don't necessarily need to give up the draft capital when you're going to be drafting one.
Good point.
But I think it is interesting to see that. I mean, we know Chris Ballard never goes to pro days. We know Shane Steichen didn't really attend any of the pro days, but they do attend these private workouts, and this is where the final draft board is getting made up, and where the Colts are going to decide which of these quarterbacks that they want to lead their franchise. Because, I mean, we talked about Chris Ballard going to Quentin Nelson's pro day or a private workout way back in the day. He could feel Quentin Nelson. Talked about it last year when the Colts went to Cincinnati to work out Desmond Ridder. That's where Chris Ballard felt the physical presence of Alec Pierce. So going to these private workout sessions with all these quarterbacks, as I think it was Wyatt Law that said it up here. He said, I wonder if Ballard felt Levis today. And I also saw in the chat that Anthony Richardson's workout happened possibly yesterday. I think Christine also said that the Colts plane was a Gainesville.
Oh yeah,
airport.
That's a good point.
So yes, it does seem like maybe his workout did happen yesterday, and they came back up to Lexington today. But it's Ballard, a lot of times when he sees these guys up close, yes, he always says you can rely on the tape, but it is different seeing these guys in a private workout, because they may be throwing against air. That's not really what they're looking for, is how many completions they make or anything like that. They're going to get up close of their mechanics. How does the ball come off of their hand? Just the power. And then when you sit down in that room with this quarterback and you're breaking down film, and you're saying, why did this go? So walk me through this play and why it went wrong. Walk me through this play, why it went right. Getting on the whiteboard and saying, so if there's this defense up there, what how would you check the protection? How would you get the team into the right play call? What hot routes would you designate on certain plays? And while they're doing this, they also don't want the quarterback sitting there just thinking and taking forever to answer these. It's got to be quick. I mean, it's got to be almost instantaneous. They want to see how quickly they can process. And then this is where Shane Steichen, where he always says they got to be obsessed with their craft, obsessed with football. This is kind of where you see that as well. I mean, because he talked about when they met with Justin Herbert got a question wrong and he was immediately beating himself up for it. He was a perfectionist and he corrected himself as well, knew what the right answer was right after before the Chargers, even had to tell him. That's what the Colts are looking for. They're looking for that quarterback that has a very high mental capacity, that has plenty to work with from a physical perspective, and someone that they know is going to be obsessed with their craft and do everything they can to be great. And that's what you have to be when you're a quarterback, a franchise quarterback, and the most important position in football.
Yeah, and I actually had wrote a piece about Morocco Brown visiting Anthony Richardson. Yes, it's true that for the Colts, that's kind of the unicorn to look for, is like where Morocco Brown's eyes at. That's kind of like an inside guy, or at least it has been, I guess. But make no mistake, these private workouts, you have literally, I mean, Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard weren't there with Morocco Brown. They're going to be there watching Anthony Richardson. They're going to be there. They were there watching Will Levis, they were there watching both Richardson and Levis. So again, I think this is, the point in time where these guys are going to be making their choices. I mean, without question, because you've got them all in the same place in real time, watching these throws go well or bad, or, oh, he missed that question. He showed this type of character. And I guarantee you afterward, they're probably spending a couple hours probably digesting what they heard.
Absolutely. But like I said, we're 3 weeks from the draft. This is where the Colts are going to narrow down and get their draft board pretty much finalized. So with these workouts, then they'll all go back, meet next week, really talk in depth about each one of these quarterbacks, and then they develop a plan for draft night. So, but that's our show for this evening, guys. Thank you all so much for all the support. The chat was absolutely awesome tonight. I want to give a shout out to Freddie Williams, Logan Schmidt, Christine, Nomadic Brian, 81 Deuce. I got to get that one right. I think I said Logan already. Sky, Rich Wheeler, Stats Matt, DSG Good Bar. Shout out to Logan and DSG Good Bar for the super chats. Make sure you guys follow all of their content on social media. You guys have been absolutely awesome. And go ahead, and if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and follow us on all the things. Go ahead and like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook. Go ahead and follow at Colts on FN on Twitter. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit that bell so you know whenever Drake and I are going live, Destin and Shot are going live. And guys, guess what? This will be the last time we speak to you before the Indy Draft Guide goes live. So yes, there's still a little bit of time to pre-order the Indy Draft Guide. It releases on April 10th. It has been finished. We wrote our final pieces this week for the Indy Draft Guide. Over 225 scouting reports and fits with the Colts on all these prospects. You'll want to make sure you have it on hand. The link is in the description. Go ahead and click that, and you'll be able to take you right there to order your copy, because it's what we'll be using all draft cycle, and we've been really working hard on it. So I think you guys will love it. So go follow Drake at DWalster. Drake, what you got on horseshoehuddle.com that the people can check out, buddy?
So I actually just released a piece on Rocky Scene potentially reuniting with the Colts has come out. But another one is the top needs for the Colts remaining and upcoming is how the Minshew signing was a value deal for Indianapolis.
Absolutely. Guys, and it's happening. Tomorrow, my second mock draft is releasing tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern on horseshoehuddle.com. You'll want to go check that out. I got two trades in there. We've got a quarterback, we've got an offensive lineman, we've got some defensive backs, a wide receiver, a linebacker even. It's going to be a fun one. So make sure you go check that out. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL, and we will be back Monday night to talk Florida Gators quarterback Anthony Richardson, diving into the pros, the cons, and will Mr. AR be a Colt here in 3 weeks? So we'll see you then.